Monday, November 5th. Dave Lochran, Adam Shar. We've got ourselves an interesting 9-gamer ahead of us. Still some moving parts, moving pieces that we're waiting on, specifically with Miami. Not just injuries, but what these starting lineups are going to look like. So we'll be sure to break all of it down in depth and really backpedal and kind of just I think, Adam, we might have to circle back to some games based on the news we get throughout today's show.
Yeah, hopefully it comes out during the show so that we are able to do that and it's not, late news where we have to just scramble and change everything.
Yeah, that would be my hope as well. Let's get it done. Here we go. So 9 games. We'll start with Houston and Indiana. It's kind of amazing, too, that you look at these two teams this year, Adam, and from a pace of play standpoint, the Pacers are dead last behind Memphis, behind the Knicks. Utah's playing like the 10th slowest pace. You have the Pacers dead last and Houston playing the 6th slowest pace. So initially you'd look at this over under and be like, what? 214? Well, these teams are not playing very fast this year, but it should be a close game. Now, another thing to mention, it's a 1-point spread, by the way. Another thing to mention is that Thad Young is now probable. I was hoping that he was going to be out, so then you could get a little bit of Sabonis in there while everyone else probably tries to chase him. TJ Leaf, 15 minutes from him. But it looks like that'll be a non-factor. Thad with that illness is probable to play, so that's not going to matter.
Adam's gone. He's coming back.
No.
I'm not kidding.
No.
Also, not that anybody cares, but Peter Dinklage. It's this inside joke shit that gets me. All right, he's back.
I just do it. Oh, there he is. What happened?
I don't know. I didn't lose internet. It just
God.
cut you out, and I restarted it, and I came back.
Where did you fall off?
All of it.
I think you were giving the intro. I don't know.
Oh, God damn. All right.
Yeah, no, that was weird. I don't know why that happened.
What I said was the Pacers and Astros. See, now you got me all messed up, man. The Pacers and Rockets are both playing at like bottom paces this year, 30th and 25th, both very slow. Pretty low total, but a very close spread, both decent enough teams to where this game stays very competitive. I also said that I was looking forward to getting some Sabonis in there with Thaddeus Young hopefully being out, but he's probable. So you're not worried about TJ Leaf starting. You're not worried about any of that. Thad Young is expected to play, and both of these teams, for the most part, should be healthy. Outside of Eric Gordon, who is out.
Yeah, I think that on the Indiana side, it's kind of site dependent. I really like the spot for Oladipo, but his price tag on DraftKings, I think, is just egregious. He's like $8,200, and he should play around 36 minutes. There's nothing not to like about this matchup for him. So I absolutely love Oladipo, and then Miles Turner also is $5,100 at center. Again, just a price tag that I think is way too cheap. On FanDuel, it's tougher because you have Oladipo at 9,100, and it's not a spot like with Westbrook on the slate, with Davis on the slate, with plenty of places to spend money. It's a little bit harder to get up to him at shooting guard, I think. And then Miles Turner at center, it's kind of no man's land because you have Bam Adebayo at 3,800, and then you have a slate full of good centers. So I think this is a game where I would have much more exposure to Indiana on DraftKings than I would on FanDuel.
Yeah. Oladipo and Butler are both in similar spots. Apparently there was a downvote before the show started, and I don't know. I don't think anyone was blaming it on Marino. I wasn't. So I don't know. It's not on you, pal. Don't worry. And if it is, take it back, please. And all thumbs up are appreciated. But no, look, this game, I think Butler and Oladipo are similar in the sense that both of them are pretty ball dominant shooting guards. Oladipo more than Butler. Both of them, are similarly priced on DraftKings and even on FanDuel, where Butler's 9.5, Depot's 9.1, and both of them are in, I guess, decent spots. But Butler has an added benefit of, one, playing in the second highest total game of the slate, and two, even if you see some Pat Bev defense, I'd rather see that than at his age with his problems than Paul. But at the same time, this slate doesn't make it so that Depot and Butler are just super easy fits. And you also have a bunch of other guys that are priced above 10K, not all of them great plays, but there's a good chance, Adam, that we're going to get a decent amount of value here on FanDuel and on DraftKings.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that another thing working in Butler's favor is that he's small forward eligible, and the forward positions today kind of suck. So that makes it a little bit easier as well. I guess to be fair, though, I think that most positions other than center today suck. So I don't know. I think that Butler and Oladipo are both guys that I love on DraftKings, and then it's going to be a lot tougher to get to on FanDuel.
Yeah, agreed. I think both of them are very, very viable here. They're both too cheap. By the way, Oladipo this season, because we're still on this game, he has not played that many competitive games. But when you look at the amount of minutes he's playing and you look at the usage he has, like in games that have been actually competitive this year, Adam, he's averaging 37 minutes and 46 DraftKings points in games decided by 10 or fewer points. That is relevant because the Pacers have blown a bunch of teams out. I think they lost in blowout fashion once. They haven't played that many games, but we do know that when it's close, when it's competitive, and I'd be shocked if this game blew out one way or the other, he's going to play close to 40 minutes and he's going to chuck up a lot of shots. Even in the games where he played like 33 minutes against San Antonio and they blew them out and played part of the fourth quarter, he was very, very passive. He was deferring, didn't really need to score. This should be a game where for every minute Depot's out there, he's going to need to have to shoot.
Yeah, absolutely. I really like the spot for him. The usage rate's so high, the minutes should be there. And that's a really good point about blowouts earlier in the season, because we even saw on DraftKings, we saw the price tags on several of these Pacers guys decrease as a result of basically their average minutes played being so low, but it had nothing to do with the actual rotation. It just had to do with them being in blowouts every game. So yeah, in competitive games, I have no issue projecting 36 to 38 minutes for Oladipo.
Yep, neither do I. Not one bit. Same thing for Zach LaVine. We'll get there shortly. Anything else, though, in this game? The other side, I mean, you obviously have Harden, you have Chris Paul. Chris Paul leads the league in potential assists this year. That should come down now that Harden's going to be back on the court full time. And Harden ranks second in the league in usage, behind only on Antetokounmpo. So both of these guys, provide value. It's just how much value do they provide on this slate for you?
Not much for me. I hate playing either one of them when the other is healthy. And this is also a pace down spot against Indiana. I'm gonna have trouble getting to either one. Just looking, I have my FanDuel projections pulled up in front of me. I have Paul projected for like 38 FanDuel points, which isn't really going to get it done at 8,500. The only way I could really see getting to him is if, because point guard is kind of barren. But even then, I don't have much Paul. Harden, I have 45, 46. So neither one is really in a great spot for me, I don't think, because they play 75% of their minutes alongside each other. And then Clint Capella's price tag has come up to where he's just a very, very marginal play for me as well.
Yeah, I'm with you across the board on these guys. Writing the deep dive today on awesemo.com, I think Depot was the only guy other than Sabonis, who that was the caveat that obviously Thad Young had to be out, even though Sabonis has been ridiculously good this year with Thaddeus Young healthy. That was really it for me. It's hard to really fall in love with any of these guys. Dan Strafford we did the podcast last night or this morning, however you want to view it. It had asked about, Carmelo Anthony. Anthony's not that cheap given, what he's going to need to produce. And, James Ennis is healthy now. PJ Tucker you have in the lineup. You even have guys like Gerald Green, who if he gets hot is going to see more run. Carmelo Anthony, I guess the question is, what effect do you see Eric Gordon out having on this team? We know that he was playing big minutes even with Harden in. Is there anyone that's really going to take over here? I mean, I would expect it to be Gerald Green if there was one guy where he's saying, is there another chucker on the team that can back up Harden, play the majority minutes at the 2, and kind of take his place, because Gordon's been shit anyway from a production standpoint or efficiency standpoint. My guess is that Green would benefit the most here, but I don't know how much you really like him. It's tough to fall in love with a guy like Gerald Green in this low-paced game.
Yeah, and I mean, the last game that Gordon missed, we saw Gary Clark pick up most of those minutes. Green got a couple of minutes at the 2. Gary Clark played the rest. Harden played backup point guard. So, yeah, I don't think that there's a DFS relevant beneficiary, because I don't see the need to play Gary Clark. But Anthony's minutes don't really increase, because as long as they keep Hartenstein in the rotation, that means PJ Tucker is playing all of his minutes at the 4. And or on the wing in general. And that means that Anthony's minutes can only go so far. When you had PJ Tucker playing the 5 behind Clint Capella, that's more minutes available on the wing for Carmelo Anthony to potentially soak up. But with them using a different backup center now, it's just really tough for him to really get there.
Yeah, it's a great point. But I think we both agree there isn't really one person that directly benefits from Gordon being out. You know, a few guys may see some additional minutes, but no one's going to shoot above 30 minutes at a sub 4K price point.
Right.
All right, let's move on. Orlando, Cleveland. If you guys in chat have any questions, feel free to hit us with them, and we will do what we can to answer those. Joseph Balupo asked Adam if he got his new router yet. That's actually, I want to know as well. Did you get your new router?
No, because I'm an idiot and put it in the cart and didn't order it.
Oh my God. Did your internet go out upon ordering?
Yeah, right. No, I just put it there and then forgot to do it, and yeah.
All right. Well,
and it's one of those things that like I think about it at 4:45 every day, and then other than that, I don't think about it.
Is it now? Is it ordered now?
It will be by the end of today.
Okay. All right. Well, let's hope we don't run into any problems. Orlando, Cleveland. Orlando by 4.5 points at home, a 213 total. Here's another game where you have two teams that are playing at a relatively slow pace. Cleveland playing at a very slow pace this year, which is funny because a lot of times you would expect a really bad defensive team, Adam, that has a bunch of shooters, but nobody that can really, set up in the half court and operate an offense. You would expect them with guys like Hood and with Clarkson and with Sexton. You would expect them with guys like that, even Nance, to play at a faster pace, especially with Kevin Love out. But that's not what happened. They've actually gone down in pace. They're the third lowest pace slowest pace in the entire league.
Yeah, the fortunate thing is that they still absolutely suck on defense. So
Yes.
it still take guys against them and feel good about it. But if they played at a fast pace, it would just be an absolute, DFS like fantasy for us to take guys against them. So yeah, it could be a better spot, but it's still a really good one.
It's a phenomenal spot. I just find it interesting that this type, usually really bad teams with a bunch of chuckers, play at a fast pace. That's all.
Right. Yeah.
Let's start with Orlando. I want to start with Aaron Gordon, $6,500 on DraftKings. He's over on FanDuel at 73. So favorable pricing on each site. Aaron Gordon's been pretty disappointing this year. He has failed to hit 30 fantasy points in 5 of 9 starts. But he also has a really high ceiling because he's perfectly willing to jack up threes. He's not a bad rebounder. He can give you the defensive stats. He can give you the stocks, the steals plus the blocks. And Jonathan Isaac has already been ruled out here. This seems like it sets up for a really good spot for Aaron Gordon. I actually like him quite a bit, and I expect this to be a nice bounce back performance on Monday.
Yeah, and it's also worth pointing out that in addition to everything you said, he's had a pretty tough string of matchups. Like if you go through the games he's played this year, had a good game against Miami, struggled against a Charlotte defense that has plenty of long defenders, had a good game against Philadelphia, struggled against Boston, Portland, Milwaukee. Those are all difficult matchups. Had a good game against Sacramento, struggled against the Clippers, and then had a good game against the Spurs. So it's been pretty matchup dependent for him this year. And this is obviously one where you would expect him to have plenty of success. If you wanted one concern, it would probably be that he played 40 plus minutes last night. But that's not something that I really factor in all that much because it's such a noisy stat trying to predict, how back-to-backs are going to affect anyone on any given night. So that's the only negative I have here. And it's not one that I'm even going to consider.
Look, the only way it's a negative is if this game turns into a massive blowout early on, right? And then you get your Kem Birch or something. Like then you get the guys, you get your Jarrell Martin out there. But with Jonathan Isaac out, let's say this game's even remotely competitive. Gordon's playing another 35 or so minutes.
Yeah, I haven't projected for 36 right now, and I wouldn't be surprised if it even went a little bit over if the game stays competitive.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you take a look at last night's game, that was not an overtime game. He played all but 7 minutes.
Yeah, he played the entire second half.
The entire second half. So if you don't, obviously you don't include halftime, he played 33 straight minutes because he closed 9.5 minutes out in the second quarter. The only time he sat was 7 minutes in between his first and second rotation. Like that to anybody should be encouraging, right? Like that should be encouraging to anybody that Steve Clifford, and we know that there's been a coaching carousel in Orlando, right? Like the list of Magic head coaches over the past however many years, you had Clifford, you had Vogel, you had Skiles, you had Borrego as an interim coach, a bunch of guys, but just under Gordon, he's already seen 3. So it's encouraging to me that Clifford is willing to give him the minutes that he deserves because he's easily their best power forward. Let's move on. So we both like Gordon. Good bounce back spot, and you raise a good point too. Just given that the matchups have been tough. Now, is he a somewhat volatile player? He has been throughout his career. That doesn't mean he can't turn things around. What are your thoughts on Vooch now that he's almost 9K on DraftKings? He's 9,000 flat on FanDuel. What do you make of this matchup against Tristan Thompson and the Cleveland Cavs?
I always like him just because he's such a good scorer. He's a good rebounder and he's involved in the passing game. So he picks up, assists. It's just that the price tag is at a point now where he's not a great value at a very deep center position. So it's kind of tough to get a ton of exposure to him. I mean, I have him projected for around 45 FanDuel points, which is perfectly fine, but it just doesn't really get him in lineups tonight. So that's the only problem with him. I don't have any issue whatsoever with the spot.
What about the rest of this team?
I think that some of the other cheap guys are interesting. You have Terrence Ross. So there's going to be one of these guys is probably going to do well. Last night it was Ross. I'm not convinced that the rotations are exactly the same, but you're going to have Wesley Iwundu starting. He only played about 14 minutes last night. He opened the first half and the second half, and then you had Terrence Ross come in. Ross played 31 minutes. I think at least 4 of those minutes were because of Jonathan Simmons picking up a second foul in the second quarter. So I think that either Jonathan Simmons plays like 26 to 28 minutes, and he's a good play, or Terrence Ross gets up around 30 minutes again tonight, making him a really good play. So I certainly don't want them in the same lineup, but I think both of them offer the potential to be really low owned, value guys in a good matchup against Cleveland. I think DJ Augustine's price tag is still too cheap. He was 1% owned last night, played 32 or 34 minutes. I project him for 30 minutes on a nightly basis, and this is another good matchup for him. And then Evan Fournier still stays too cheap. You and I were talking about it earlier. He actually leads this team in usage rate. He picks up assists as well. He's going to play probably around 32, 34 minutes. So it's a spot where I also like Fournier. I would much rather take those guys. I think it's much easier to get those guys in the lineups than it is to pay all the way up for Vooch.
Yeah. So my thing is, I know a lot of people don't like Evan Fournier, and to some extent, there's good reason for that. However, you can dislike a guy and still acknowledge that he's in a really good spot and that he actually is having one of those seasons where you'd be silly not to consider him. And here's what I mean by that. His usage rate is 25.6%, career high. He has an assist rate that's 10% higher than his previous career high. I think it's around like 25% as well, or 24%, which for someone like Fournier is huge, 24.5%. Both of those are really encouraging. Sure, they're probably not sustainable, but he actually leads the Magic in usage through their first 9 games. He's not expensive. And if you look at just efficiency allowed to shooting guards, the Magic or the Cavs are allowing the highest efficiency to the position, the most points, second most rebounds, second most assists. They don't really have anybody that can guard somebody like Fournier, like actually capable of guarding him throughout a game. You don't have to like the guy. You might not think that he has a ceiling, but the numbers alone say that his usage, the assists, the minutes, he does have a ceiling, and he has a ceiling. Put it this way, Adam, is Fournier going to give you 50 fantasy points, 40 fantasy points every game? No, obviously not. If he continues to play at this pace, can he give you 40? Absolutely.
Yeah, and he's another one. You mentioned it with the Pacers, but Orlando's been involved in some non-competitive games of late as well. They lost to the Clippers by 25. They lost to Milwaukee by whatever 13 plus 9 is, 22. And so he only played 27, 28 minutes in those games, but you can't really factor that in when projecting him for tonight.
All right. Yeah, Fournier and Gordon for me are the ones that make the most sense, just from a pricing standpoint, a positional standpoint. Curious to see what your thoughts are on the other side of this game. So you have a bad Cleveland team, just in really every single facet of the game. Is there anyone here that stands out to you as a decent play?
Not really. On FanDuel, I ran 150 lineups. I capped everyone at 40% ownership and just looked to see, what I got. And it gave me 1% Sam Decker. And that's it. I think that if you're playing a bunch of lineups and looking to get a high ownership play, especially, or not a high ownership, a high upside play with low probability, Larry Nance at like 5,300 with power forward eligibility makes sense because it hasn't happened yet. And it would involve Thompson, playing poorly or getting in foul trouble or something. But if Nance just gets like 26 minutes, he's going to smash his price tag. And it's going to be the day that he wins a tournament is the day that nobody's expecting him to get those minutes. If there's a day where Tristan Thompson sits, everyone's going to play him and it doesn't matter. So getting him in, a small percentage of your lineups, if you're a max entry guy, gives you a ton of upside. But, outside of that, it's just nothing really to like. I could see Jordan Clarkson playing 28 minutes, maybe if he closes instead of Sam Decker, but we don't know if that's going to happen. As long as J.R. Smith is in this rotation, it kind of just messes up everything.
Agreed. Man, hot takes galore in the chat right now. I must say, Capella a must play versus terrible Miles Turner. Westy is the only must play. I wouldn't say it's a hot take. I don't know if he's the only guy, but I don't think it's a hot take to say Westbrook is a really good play. Man, this is heating up. So we'll any of the hot takes, we got to read these out loud because sometimes they get pretty intense. Miami and Detroit. All right, we're gonna have to spend some time on this game. I'm sure our pace will be noted throughout the show, Adam, but there are a few games we don't have to spend much time on, and we'll get to them briefly. This isn't one of them because we're dealing with the situation where Hassan Whiteside is out. We expect Goran Dragic to play. You and I, before the show, even earlier in the day, we're going over potential ways that this shakes out. Now, before I even get started, you haven't seen a starting lineup yet for Miami either, right?
Correct.
Okay, I just want to make sure because I haven't, and I wasn't sure if we from Ira Winderman or something if we got one. But sensibly, you would expect Winslow to start at the 4 to guard Blake, and then Bam Adebayo at the 5 against Drummond. He gives away some weight and some height, but Olynyk is a really bad defender, and he hates playing anywhere close to the basket. Then on the other side, and you posed this option earlier, that maybe you have Olynyk start at the 5, or I'm sorry, were you saying at the 4, right?
And where he's been starting.
At the 4 and try and, shoot the bigs off the court. If that goes south quickly, though, then you're in a mess. It just seems now, and I don't know what Spoelstra's going to do. It just seems like for matchup purposes, Winslow is the best guy to guard Blake, and Adebayo would be the guy that you probably want out here just because he lives at home, he stays around the basket, and while he's got an absolutely terrible touch around the rim, yes, 50% field goal shooting for his career at the rim is terrible. He's still a hustle player that can play against bigger centers like Drummond. So as of now, that's what I'm assuming, but we have nothing definitive.
Yeah, and that's where I'm at as well. We've seen Olynyk starting. So luckily, I think most of this will be hashed out by the starting lineup. So we've seen Olynyk starting at the 4, and if he were to start at the 4 today, then it means he's basically locked into big minutes because he's going to most likely be the backup center as well. He's been playing really poorly this year, so I kind of doubt that Spoelstra is going out there with the idea of getting Olynyk 30 minutes, putting himself in that spot where that's the game plan going in. It also makes more sense for defensive reasons, like you said, to start Winslow at the 4, let him match up with Blake. You can have Derrick Jones Jr. be the backup power forward, and you let Olynyk be the backup center to Bam Adebayo. So I'm assuming, as of now, I'm assuming that's what they do. Then you get into trying to figure out, who's the better play out of Adebayo and Olynyk. I think that it's Adebayo. I don't think, that's a hot take by any stretch, but Adebayo is the one that I would expect to play most of the minutes at center. I would expect Olynyk to play somewhere from like 18 to 22. The risk that you run is we have seen Spoelstra in the past, specifically last season with Dwight Howard. He would put Kelly Olynyk in for Hassan Whiteside and then basically force Howard out of the game because Howard's not going to chase Olynyk around the 3-point line. He could try the same strategy here against Drummond, but that would still only be effective if Kelly Olynyk is making shots, which he hasn't been doing all season long. So I still assume that plan 1, 2, and 3 is probably for Adebayo to play center as many minutes as he can and Olynyk to back him up. There's just a little bit of added risk to rostering Adebayo because there are certainly times where if Olynyk gets hot, he stays on the floor.
Right. I totally agree. Manningdale City says Kelly's had a bunch of good games versus Blake going even back to the Celtics days, Laffy. I'm not saying he hasn't, and I'm not saying that he can't have a good game. What I'm saying is that this Pistons front court poses a rather unique problem because your center is this hulking 285-pound player that unless he's in foul trouble, you're not taking him off the court. And I don't see any way he doesn't just gobble up the boards and gobble up everything here, including around the rim. And then you have Blake, who's just having a ridiculous season. So, I get, what did he say? He said Jordan and Blake was the same. Look, I guess it's tough for me to look at that when you have different coaching and everything. I'm trying to break down how Spoelstra is going to do things. And I think there's a chance that Olynyk's minutes are limited if things don't go right early on. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, well, and even if you want to ignore the whole defensive matchup and the fact that Winslow's better, it's still an issue in that they need someone to be the backup center. I don't really have a reason to think it's anyone other than Olynyk. If it were anyone other than Olynyk, I would guess that it's Justice Winslow. But if Justice Winslow is the backup power forward, he's not also the backup center. And so if you start Olynyk and have him playing the starting minutes at the 4 and then the backup minutes at the 5, it means that you're going to end up basically staggering his minutes, and there's no way for him to not play a bunch of minutes. And I just kind of doubt that the game plan going in for a guy who's been absolute trash this season, who got benched for Derek Jones Jr. in their most recent game, is going to be, let's run Kelly Olynyk out there as many minutes as humanly possible.
Right. That's the concern. Kelly Olynyk played 15 minutes last game when Drummond played 15 minutes. Do you know which game I'm talking about against Atlanta? And that's a smaller front court.
You said Drummond.
Oh, I'm sorry. Olynyk played 15 minutes the last game that Whiteside also played 16 minutes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Olynyk played no minutes at center in that game. He's played 14 minutes at center all season long. There was, from the time Whiteside left that game, Adebayo played every minute at center with the exception of 33 seconds. It was Justice Winslow with Derek Jones Jr. at the 4. But yeah, Olynyk was benched like 30 or 40 seconds into the second half, never came back in. Derek Jones Jr. played over him.
So I think just the biggest concern, if Olynyk gets off to a hot start, I have a pretty good chance that he continues to get minutes. But at the same time, if Blake gets off to a hot start and Olynyk's out there and Olynyk's not looking good, Spoelstra definitely has him on a very short leash. So we'll see. Let's see what the starting lineup is. That's going to tell us a lot, Adam. I want to get to the Detroit side and talk about this spot for Drummond, but what else do you make of this game? I think Winslow is safest in terms of playing time here. I think you get around 32 to 35 minutes from Winslow. They're going to need his defensive acumen here. And then, of course, Josh Richardson's going to get plenty of run, but he's 7,500 and Dragic is expected to return.
Yeah, I think that, Adebayo is my favorite when you factor in price. But then beyond that, Winslow, the price tag went up a little bit after the last game, and you don't want to read too much into that because you have to remember that Dragic wasn't in, and that's why Justice Winslow almost had a triple-double. He's still, a good play because the minutes are secure. He's going to be needed defensively and everything, but he does take a hit with Dragic in. So does Josh Richardson, whose price tag is up. The minutes are really nice, but he shouldn't be expected to facilitate as much. He shouldn't be expected to shoot as much as when Goran Dragic is out. I don't have a ton of interest in Dragic himself either. Outside of Bam, it probably isn't a whole lot for me from Miami. Maybe some Winslow.
Yeah. Bam, too. If you wanted to roll the dice on Olynyk, I think he's the riskiest of them if he doesn't start. But if Bam starts, you're probably getting I would put him around 28 minutes. What about you if he starts?
Yeah, I have him around 28 I have him at 30 minutes right now for tournaments, but I would feel comfortable with like 28.
Yeah.
With Olynyk, if Olynyk doesn't start, don't play him in the same lineups as Andre Drummond because his clear path to having a game that you would want him to have if you're rostering him is that he's knocking down every shot and making life miserable for Drummond, and the game probably went small.
All right. Do you think Dwayne Casey's even willing to play small ball? Like, do you think that's something he's willing to do? I mean, I guess it's possible, but if Drummond's not in foul trouble, I don't know if Casey's even willing to take him off the court.
I don't know either, but Casey does have a history of pulling his center when he has to. He just got John Lure back, who can play at the 5. I'm not saying that it's high probability, but if Olynyk's out there and knocks down like 5 straight wide open threes because Drummond's late closing out, what are his options?
Right. He also had Joval, who he just despised.
Yeah. It's obviously a different player, and a much better player in Drummond.
Right, but anything could happen. Manningdale City actually has a good question here. He says, "You think Blake can get can have a ceiling game versus Winslow and Bam?" I'll let you answer that because I think it's an interesting question. There hasn't been a whole lot of talk about Blake.
I mean, I don't think it's a particularly good matchup for Blake, assuming Winslow gets the start, but I don't think it's like an awful one either. I mean, he's doing so much. It has nothing to do with the matchup why I like Blake. It has more to do on FanDuel. He's 9,400 at a pretty bad position, so I think he's really interesting there. He's obviously got a monster usage rate this year, but it's not a matchup that really does anything for me.
What if Olynyk and Bam start in the front court?
If Olynyk starts, I would like Blake more, but
me too.
I like him either way.
Me too. I still think they'll stagger the minutes with Olynyk and Bam no matter what. Drummond, he's a monster. He leads the league in potential rebounds or rebound chances, we can call them. He puts up huge numbers whenever he's not in foul trouble or whenever Joel Embiid's not taking up real estate in his head and tagging the wrong Andre Drummond on Twitter. Man, it kind of doesn't matter who starts at the 5 for Miami. This is a pretty sweet spot for Drummond.
Yeah, there's just nothing really to slow him down. Adebayo's had some success in the past against bigger guys, like you mentioned, but Drummond's just such a good player that I'm not, concerned about that. He should get every rebound possible against Kelly Olynyk for any time that they share the floor. The only problem is that on FanDuel, you can only roster one center, and Bam Adebayo is 3,800. Even so, with 40% ownership caps, Adebayo hit that cap in my projections, and then Drummond still got into 20% of my lineup. So I think it's safe to say I will have a pretty healthy amount of Andre Drummond tonight.
All right. I think so too. I mean, it's just a very good spot. The minutes are going to be, I think it'll be very tough for Drummond not to get the minutes unless, of course, he has 3 fouls in his first 4 minutes as he did against Philly. 2 quick fouls, and he comes back out, another quick foul. That was a brutal first half and game for Drummond, but in competitive games, you're getting a lot of run from this guy. Is there 20-20 upside here? Yeah, there is. He's done it 3 times already this season. He has monster upside. Oh, and he's shooting 60% from the free throw line, which is amazing for Andre Drummond. So, yeah, I'm on board. He's also attempted 9 3-pointers. He's made 1 of them. But outside of Drummond, we talked about Blake. There's a lot of power forwards that offer pretty good value at that position. So it's hard to really get like high on Blake. Is there anything else from Detroit that you're targeting?
Blake's really site dependent for me. I like him a lot more on FanDuel than I do on DraftKings. Other than that, though, I don't really have much interest in guys from Detroit. Reggie Jackson's price tag doesn't leave a ton of value, I don't think. Ish Smith doesn't have that high of a ceiling. Their rotation everywhere else is just an absolute mess and only going to get worse with John Lure back. So, it's just the bigs for me.
All right, let's move along then. You guys, again, have any question on this game? We'll come back. We'll circle back if we get any news because we're waiting on some really important news from this one. Chicago and New York, another one, Adam. The Knicks are 2.5-point favorites. You have a 213 total here. This is another game where both of the teams involved are playing at a bottom 10 pace. So that's the case for Houston and Indiana. It's the case for Cleveland and Orlando, I think, is 19th in pace or 17th in pace. And then again for Chicago and New York. So there aren't that many up tempo games. It shouldn't make a huge difference because this brand of basketball is still so much faster than before. But I want to talk to you about Hardaway, who with this new starting lineup, they've played 68 minutes together. He has a 35% usage rate when he's with this starting lineup. Dotson, Ntilikina, or Ntilikina, Dotson, Hardaway, Dotson, Vonleh, and Mitchell Robinson. And I feel like he's only going to start seeing more minutes with this exact 5 unit because Vonleh got in so much foul trouble the last 2 games. And Mitchell Robinson's beginning to earn some trust over there in New York, and he's beginning to get more minutes. That can only bode well for, I know this guy drives you nuts, but Hardaway on the court with guys like Ntilikina and Dotson and Vonleh and Robinson and no Cantor, he's just going to chuck away every opportunity he gets. We just have to hope that he plays.
Yeah, and I think that your point about him getting more minutes with that group is a really good one because if you look at his actual usage rate overall for the 5 games since they changed the starting lineup, it's only at 29%. But then you keep in mind that Noah Vonleh essentially missed the last 2 games because of foul trouble. That means more minutes for Mario Hezonja. It means more minutes for Enes Kanter. Those are 2 guys who chuck shots, and it takes usage away from Tim Hardaway. So the more time he gets with that group, the more shots he's going to get up. We've seen the assist rate increase as well. The issue, of course, is that he's questionable for this game. He hurt his back yesterday, came back in for a few minutes, and then left for the rest of the night. And back injuries tend to not be things that get worse or that get better, overnight. So right now I'm assuming he doesn't play, but he's listed as questionable. So obviously we'll just have to keep an eye on that. If he does not play, I think that you see Alonzo Trier push 30 minutes here. He's been getting a bunch of run anyway, and he was the biggest beneficiary when Hardaway went down yesterday. I think that you'll see Trey Burke get, around 18 minutes at the 2. You have Moutier backing up Ntilikina at point guard now. So I think Burke will get around 18, Trier will get around 30. Obviously, potential for that to go a little bit differently depending on how they play, but that's where I have it projected if Hardaway does miss this game.
You know what the worst possible thing in basketball is from a fantasy player standpoint?
What's that?
Chalk Mario Hezonja.
I hope he's chalk. I've been playing 14 minutes.
Is that wait?
If Hardaway's out.
You have him playing 14 minutes if Hardaway's out?
Yeah.
Really?
I have.
See, I have him playing.
I have him backing up Dotson.
Very interesting. Okay. Very interesting. I don't know where to put him if Hardaway's out, and here's why. I think that with Hezonja, you're averaging like 18 minutes, but they're all over the place. He played 25 minutes yesterday. Looking at the rotation from that game, Adam, and you look, who is he coming in for? I know you look through Popcorn Machine. You use these quite a bit. He came in for Dotson in the first half or in the first quarter, and was relieved by Dotson, I believe, in the Dotson in the second quarter. So you see him as a direct replace or substitute for Dotson. I see it a little bit differently. Now, if Hardaway's out and Hezonja is going to be chalk, that's really hard not to just fade him on principle alone. He does have a 31% usage rate with Hardaway off the court, and I think that is pretty important here. But so I guess you just see him playing more of the forward positions and a lot less at the 2.
Yeah, he's been playing the 4 for the most part this season, and he's also been kind of losing minutes too. Like he didn't even 2 games ago when Vonleh was in foul trouble, they played Mitchell Robinson at the 4 for the fourth quarter over Hezonja. Yesterday, when Hardaway went out, Trier subs in for him. Then Hezonja, like you said, comes in for Dotson. Dotson ends up coming back in for Trier, and then Hezonja subbed out when Mitchell Robinson comes back in. In the third quarter, when Hardaway left the game originally, Trier came in. Trier played the rest of the game except for the last 2 minutes. Hezonja subs in for Dotson again, leaves when Dotson comes back. So, yeah, I think that, and you've seen Trier just kind of getting more minutes ahead of Hezonja anyway. So I think that you get Dotson playing, his 32 to 34 minutes at the 3. You have Trier at the 2. You have, Moutier and Ntilikina splitting the point guard minutes. And then you have Hezonja picking up what Dotson doesn't play. So 14
Trey
to 6.
Burke is also in the mix.
Yeah, I have Burke getting the back. I have Trier and Burke splitting the shooting guard minutes.
Okay. I have Hazonia at more than that, but I don't have him as a guy that's going to go out there and play 30 minutes. So I have him around like 20. But if Hardaway's out, yeah, they have enough bodies that can play off the ball at the 2 that it's not really that good of a spot. Mitch Seldgard, I think, said Mitch Keldgard says, "You smoking crack, dog? 14 minutes." So I guess we'll see how this one plays out.
If Hazonia plays more minutes than that, I think it's because either Lance Thomas doesn't play or Vonleh gets in trouble again. I don't think he's getting minutes in place of Tim Hardaway.
All right. If Hardaway plays, by the way, this starting lineup, the more minutes he plays with them, the more he's just going to take shot after shot after shot. So the back injury is a concern, but don't forget about that. Vonleh not in foul trouble means that Hardaway just gets more run with guys that don't like to shoot. That really
and actually, Hazonia probably, I had given Thomas 18 minutes when I originally mapped it out. So Hazonia probably plays like, I don't know, 6 minutes and Thomas plays 12. So you get like 20 from Hazonia.
Right. That's what I have Hazonia at 20.
But like none of them from Hardaway, I don't think.
Okay. We will see. It's a hard one because there's a lot of bodies that can fill that void. And Hazonia has been playing more forward position than guard and not much shooting guard at all. What do you got for Chicago here?
Zach LaVine. I think
you can't ignore WCJ. That's not a good acronym right there. Not a good nickname. WCJ.
Yeah, not
WCJ. I don't like it.
No, but I mean, I like the Chicago. I like both of these teams really. But from the Chicago side, like Zach LaVine still just playing huge minutes in competitive games, has a usage rate up around 34%. I expect he'll see plenty of Frank Ntilikina, but with the role that he's currently playing, I just don't really care. And then on top of that, in the last game, which was competitive down the stretch against Houston, he actually finally closed at point guard. You had, for most of the season, you've had Cameron Payne and Arcidiacono splitting those point guard minutes. Obviously sometimes one getting more than the other, but they were playing 48 minutes of point guard. You finally saw Zach LaVine get those minutes to close alongside Hutchison, Parker, Holiday, and Carter. So I think that's even better for LaVine. I think that it does nothing but help him having the ball in his hands more. So I still really, really, really like Zach LaVine here.
All right, sounds good. Yeah, so do I. There's just too much volume. There's too much usage. He's third in usage behind Giannis and Harden. I don't care if this team plays at a slow pace. LaVine's just getting so much opportunity. A question in chat, DX Row asked, is Jabari a good play even with the minutes he sucked this year? Well, the thing about Parker is that every minute he has to play next to LaVine hurts him. So he was getting minutes off the bench. He would have been a better play playing 30 minutes off the bench than 35 minutes in the starting lineup. I truly believe that. I really do. We might not see eye to eye on this, Adam, but I get that he's cheap. And eventually you're going to have a good game from Parker. Like eventually at this price tag, you're going to get a good game, but I don't really know if you need to do it here. I mean, since being into the starting lineup, he's averaging like 35 minutes per game. He's producing 0.5 fantasy points per minute, and he just has been a non-factor offensively. I think we could do better around his price and below his price tag on a slate that's got a good amount of value. So I'm passing on Parker here, and if he happens to have that big game, well, I missed out on it.
I agree with everything you said as far as him being better off the bench. His usage alongside LaVine this year is down to about 21%. I still like him, though, just because this is such a good matchup for him. I projected his rates for what he does alongside LaVine, and I still have him projected for like 34, 35 fantasy points. So I still think he ends up being a good play. The issue is just what's his ownership going to be projected at? Because he's obviously a volatile player that has a very low floor. So if he's really popular, then I would like to pivot away from him. But if people are tired of playing him, I think he does still clearly have an upside at that price.
Yeah. Again, he's gonna stumble into one of those games just because his price and his minutes. Like eventually playing at the position he does, he's going to. But quickly, and then we'll move on. Wendell Carter Jr., 6,100 on DraftKings. This guy continues to put in work. Cristiano Felicio is back to playing only like 10 minutes per game. Carter Jr. has a 23% usage rate over his last 5 games, which is significantly higher when he's on the court with LaVine than Parker's is. And he's putting up great defensive stats because he's a good defensive player. I mean, if he plays another 35 minutes against the center rotation of Mitchell Robinson and Enes Kanter, this is another spot where Carter can put up good production.
Yeah, I agree. His price tag's getting up there. He's 7,800 on FanDuel, which is really
that's too much. I'm talking about DraftKings specifically.
Yeah, 6,100 there. I still like him. The $5,100 Miles Turner, I think, is a really good play. For savings, but still think Carter has plenty of upside at 6,100.
I agree. Let's keep it going here then. I still got half of these games to go, but we're making a decent pace because some of them we're not going to have a ton to talk about. OKC in New Orleans. This, on its face, it's like, this is a real tough matchup for Anthony Davis. I went back, and I'm not big on how is a guy done against this team is now, unless the team has been similar enough to where I can gain something from it. And OKC over the years has still had Steven Adams anchoring that front court defense. Anthony Davis over his last 12 games against the Pelicans is averaging 33 real points, 11 rebounds, and 3.8 stocks over his last 12 games. Adams has been active in all but one of them. Now, that's the good thing. The bad thing is that Davis's usage has slipped to 24.7% this year. Now, I don't see that being sustained. Like, I definitely see it coming up. He's coming off 2 straight campaigns with 30+% usage. But, man, 24.7% usage. So there's so many ways to look at this, Adam, because this game has the highest point total on the slate by a wide margin. Right now it's at 235. It's come down a bit, but still 235. Should be competitive. We're going to get to every player that's of note in this game, but I am curious to know where you're at on Davis because I think I may like him more than most here.
Yeah, no, I like him too. I agree with you on the usage. Like, I'm concerned because of his elbow. We know he's not the toughest guy. We know he's playing through pain. He got up 13 shots in the first game that he played with the injury. He got up he got 10 free throws yesterday or in his last game. So that was nice to add on to the field goal attempts that he got. I think it would have been like 18 total. So. And I agree that the usage rate's going to come up. So, yeah, I do like Davis here. I also like that he's power forward eligible on FanDuel. It makes it a lot easier to get to him than it would if you were center. I think that his usage this year will be lower than it was last year without Cousins because of playing a full season alongside Mirotic and because of Julius Randle being here. But I still think that it'll be higher than the 24% he's at now.
Exactly. Mirotic, Randle, it is going to make a difference. But at the same time, he just does so much. I do like Davis here. Is there anyone else, though, in New Orleans that you like? Are you on Drew today, whose price has come up? Or are you on Mirotic with Davis back? Are you on anybody other than Davis?
Drew is the other one that I'm prioritizing. I still think he plays huge minutes here. 38 is where I have him projected. It wouldn't even really be surprising if he plays more. He's going to have the ball in his hands a ton. So I like Drew a lot. Also has a chance for plenty of defensive stats. So I like Drew a lot. I have Mirotic. I'll have Mirotic in some lineups just because he's still rebounding well. He's still getting up a bunch of shots. But the price tag's gotten to a point where he's no longer, a guy that I'm playing in like the majority of my lineups.
Yeah. On the other side of this game, Giovanni Pintorno, excuse the pronunciation if that's wrong, says, I personally think Westbrook is an excellent defender. I don't, but maybe Adam does.
He might be capable of it. I don't think he has any interest in doing it.
He's certainly capable of it, but the numbers would suggest that he's not. He's talented enough, but he doesn't really care enough. He'd rather just drive to the rack and grab free rebounds and do his thing. Against New Orleans, though, I found something interesting. Drew Holiday, this is a guy whose defense has always been a strong suit, but I don't know what it is about this Pelicans team this season, but Drew Holiday individually has really struggled defensively. I don't really use defensive rating all that often. I think it doesn't tell even half of the story, but it's at 116. It's by far the worst of his career, or at least the last several years since he's actually been relevant. Several years. It's just been many years now. And New Orleans is 27th in defensive ratings. They've been crushed by opposing point guards, whether Elfrid Payton or Holiday's on the court. What do you make of this matchup for Westbrook?
Yeah, I mean, I like it a lot. I still think Holiday's a good defender. I'm not going to write him off, but the team as a whole sucks. Like, you're talking about a unit that has Etuan Moore and Nikola Mirotic playing huge minutes. So, yeah, it's not going to be a very good defensive unit. They play really, really fast. I love Westbrook here. And like I talked about it this morning with Josh, normally I don't like paying up for him that much on FanDuel just because he's relatively less valuable because of the importance of turnovers on FanDuel because there's no double-double or triple-double bonus. But with the point guard slate on FanDuel today, as ugly as it is, that's where I would prefer him just because there's not as much opportunity cost. And then on DraftKings, he's relatively more valuable in terms of his scoring. So you really like him there. So really doesn't matter the site for me today. I love Westbrook.
So do I. Absolutely love him. And if you're looking, if you're trying to play it safer, you go Westbrook over Davis just because he's a safer play. I think you would agree with that just from an injury standpoint, from everything right now. Westbrook is the guy that, is not going to kill you more often than Davis.
Yeah. I also have him projected for like 4 less points. So
who projected for the 4 less?
Westbrook.
4 less than Davis?
Than Davis, yeah.
Yeah. So do I. But just factoring in some of the intangibles, if you were deciding between Westbrook and Davis in cash, I don't think anyone would blame you for going Westbrook just to be a little bit safer.
Yeah, I would go Westbrook. They're basically, they have the same upside. I just think Davis projects a little bit higher, but you take on more risk with him.
Any interest in pairing Adams with Westbrook? We know that much of his offensive production is facilitated by Westbrook.
It's just such a tough slate to get to Adams at center. If I have Adams in my lineup, I want it to be with Westbrook, but I'm not going to be forcing Adams into lineups.
Yeah, I'm the same way. The rest of this game for me, I don't have much interest in. I don't want to pay that much for Paul George. Are we missing anyone?
I might like Paul George a little bit more than you, I think. But
yeah, well, it sounds like you do. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, and really it's just that small forward on FanDuel is really weak. And getting to George in a spot against this Pelicans team that's been atrocious defensively is really nice. I don't want him and Westbrook unless, I'm full game stacking this game. But in lineups where I don't have Westbrook, I think having George is a really good way to go.
All right, fair enough. Circling back, as I said we would do, Adebayo starting at the 5. And Goran Dragic is still probable. But with Adebayo starting at the 5, we don't have a definitive lineup.
Right. Still. Yeah. I mean, I assume that Adebayo was starting at the 5. I just want to know who's starting at the 4.
Correct. That is the issue. So we have that news, but now we'll have to wait on everything else. Denver and Boston. Not a game I'm super enticed by, Adam. You're looking at a 209 total. Denver 1-point favorites at home. It shows they've been a pretty good team this year. But a few spots do interest me, and I'll be very quick, and I'll turn it over to you. If Paul Millsap is out, I think Trey Lyles is a very interesting pivot off of some of these other value guys. He is a per-minute producer. One fantasy point per minute, actually more than that. He's already been Paul Millsap's backup at power forward. We've been seeing that. And Trey Lyles is the type of guy that can play small against this Boston team. If they are a smaller team, an undersized roster. And not to say under talented, they're super good, but they have a pretty undersized roster. Trey Lyles can play with an undersized team like this, especially with Will Barton out. So if Millsap is out, I actually do have some interest in Lyles, being that he's so damn cheap. What do you make of the Denver side?
Yeah, I like Lyles a lot if Millsap's out because it just opens up so many minutes for him. Because they basically just shared all the minutes at the 4 this season. So
and he doesn't need that much more, like an extra 10 minutes for him. Extra 8, he's up over 30.
Right, exactly. So yeah, I would love Lyles if Millsap sits. If Millsap plays, the only guy that I really see myself getting to from Denver is on FanDuel playing like a Juancho Hernangomez just to drop him at 3,900. He has a path to like 26 minutes. He could maybe do well, but probably won't. So I wouldn't want to play him on DraftKings, but he's one of the guys that would be a candidate to be my punt play on FanDuel.
Yeah. Also, a little information here from our chat in YouTube. I don't know if this is true, but someone says that it's Trey Lyles' birthday today. So there you go. Now you have to play him. Who cares if Millsap plays? No, I'm kidding. But is it his birthday? It is November 5th. God, 1995. I sure feel old. What on the other side? Do you have any interest in anyone here? Because I feel like Horford isn't in a horrible spot. going to be tough to get to him, but I don't know if I will. He's cheap. Gordon Hayward is probably going to have a good game sometime soon, and his usage is creeping up. It's one of those Boston teams that's kind of hard to peg.
Yeah, it's just a tough spot all around. Jason Tatum at 6,100 on FanDuel is the guy that I probably will end up with the most of, and that's just because I have to roster 2 power forwards over there.
Right.
So there's nothing that I actually really like here.
All right, sounds good. I don't hate Gordon Hayward. I'm just throwing it out there now. I don't hate him because he is very cheap. And he is actually a good basketball player that we saw his legs snap into 87 pieces in the debut last year against Cleveland. So he's working his way back. And I think, you're going to see one of these big games from Hayward soon where he gives you like 25, 7, and 6 or something, and you're going to be pretty happy with it. Will it happen tonight? I don't know. It's not really a pace-up game. Denver isn't really a team that plays at an ultra-fast pace, but it's worth throwing out there. He's cheap. I think you could do worse, but he's definitely not a necessity anywhere. Adam, Utah and Toronto. Kawhi Leonard sat yesterday, and Toronto was still up on the Lakers like 37-10 at one point through the first. It was just the most pathetic performance you could see. LeBron James had 2 points and no other stats in the first quarter. These guys were anemic. The game ended a little closer, but it was a blowout throughout from tip off. It was just a garbage performance at the Staples Center. Utah 2-point dogs at home. Toronto favored here, 217 total. Kawhi, I expect Kawhi to play. He's questionable, but he said he felt fine. So I'm expecting that he plays. What about you?
Yeah, so am I. He said he feels fine, and the plan has always been for him to not play. Well, not always been, but the plan is for him to not play both games with a back-to-back. So I'm guessing that he just took the first half because he had kind of been banged up a little bit anyway, so why not? And that he'll be back for tonight.
All right. I don't know how to pronounce his name. Something like bracket says makes me feel old when you read 95 and say you feel old. So I don't know. I don't know how old he is. But yeah, well, you know what? Time flies, fella. Yeah, we know one thing. Rubio has pretty incredible numbers with Donovan Mitchell sidelined. Exum got in early foul trouble last game and was garbage. You saw, as we predicted on this one. Now, Exum, I'll take an L on that. That's fine. Royce O'Neal played 23 minutes and still sucked because he does suck. And then rookie Grayson Allen played 5 minutes in that. No, I'm sorry, 27 minutes he played and had 11 fantasy points. O'Neal in that one played 21 minutes and had 5 fantasy points. So, this is the cast of rejects you have when Mitchell's not on the court. Alec Burks will be returning in this game. Not to say that he's someone you're targeting at all, but Ricky Rubio still has at least some path to high usage and a lot of assists despite the tough matchup. What do you think of Utah here?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting spot because Rubio's production without Mitchell doesn't really change much, but his ceiling does because he has a higher assist percentage, he gets more usage. So while he hasn't been consistently more productive, he does still have the opportunity for it, and he's still reasonably priced. So I like Rubio. I don't want to mess around with any of the backups to Mitchell, except for on FanDuel where you can drop your lowest score. Those are guys that, obviously go to them at min price, guys like Alec Burks and Grayson Allen. But where you can't drop your lowest score, I just think the minutes are going to be too muddied amongst those guys to really have much interest in going there.
Especially with Burks back.
Yeah, exactly. Like Burks just throws a wrench into everything as well. Joe Ingles on FanDuel specifically at small forward, I think is a good play since it's a weak position and you need 2 of them. Derek Favors kind of the same thing. He's just really cheap. But the guy that I actually like here is Ricky Rubio.
All right. Yeah, me too. The only one really. Rubio's the only guy I have interest in here. I don't love Gobert. I don't love really anybody else. And on the other side, I don't know, man. It just feels like, is Leonard a fair price? Yes, but there isn't a single Toronto player here that I'm prioritizing. I guess I'll just put it to you that way, make it an easier analysis.
Yeah, that's where I'm at as well.
Okay, fair enough. Minnesota and the Clippers. Here's a fun one. We got 2 games to go. And yes, we'll give you our top positions at the end of the show. You sign up on awesomemode.com. You can get all of that before the show and even more in depth. And we aren't on time constraints either. But for now, we don't mind giving you this content either. All you got to do, just hit us with a like. That's your gift back to us. We greatly appreciate it. Also, subscribe, hit the notification so you know when all of our videos are dropping, because sometimes, depending on the slate, they'll come out at different times. Clippers in Minnesota, Adam. We've got a pretty high total, second highest total of the game. Believe it or not, 9 games. This is the only other total aside from the Thunder and Pelicans that is above 220. It's at 228.5, Clippers by 5.5 against this really just embarrassingly bad Minnesota team. But there's a lot I like from this game, man. There's a lot. I'll let you start, and then I'll clean up afterwards. Where are you looking here? Start whichever side you like best.
Boban.
Boban.
Sounds like he's likely to start tonight. And if he does, I think that even though his price tags come up, he remains a really good play just because he's so productive on a permanent basis. He played 22 and a half minutes in 3/4 of a blowout against Orlando in his last start. He played about 14 first half minutes. So if you extrapolate that all the way out, you would get to 28. I'm not completely comfortable doing that because we have seen the Clippers close with a small ball lineup with Gallinari at times. But even if, you project Boban for, 24 minutes or 25 minutes, he's going to end up in a ton of your lineups. And I think that that's very reasonable if he does get the start. Karl Anthony Towns could be an issue as far as foul trouble goes, but you also have to keep in mind that this Minnesota team has Taj Gibson as the front court mate for Towns. And they could really easily just switch and have, Boban defend Gibson, who's going to stand around and not do much, and have Gallinari defend Towns. So that wasn't an option really against Orlando. It wasn't an option before against Philadelphia. So I'm not really concerned about that. I think that projecting him in the mid-20s is the right way to go. So I like him. I like Pat Beverly on DraftKings in particular, also on FanDuel, but on DraftKings, he's 3,800 with multi-position eligibility. This is someone that I think I've been playing pretty much every day this season with mixed results. But when the Clippers games stay close, he's more likely than not going to be closing the game out. He's really, really cheap. He's still picking up assists. He does a little bit, scoring wise as well. He can get defensive stats. So I just think he's too cheap. And then Jimmy Butler, I think it's a really good spot, especially DraftKings at 8,200, just, underpriced. And I just realized I switched teams by accident.
That's all right. I'll start with the Clippers first. Boban, put him around. I'm putting him around, if he starts, 24, 25 minutes. Now, you made a really good point that they could. It sounds so funny. You can't hide a monstrosity like Boban. But from a matchup standpoint, it might actually be possible. Because I mentioned I was like, yeah, they had him guarding Embiid the whole time. And you say, yeah, but then he'd have to chase Saric around otherwise. You make a very good point. Taj Gibson is not somebody that, you're worried about, jacking up 7 3-pointers, not someone that's rangy, not someone that's straying too far from the basket. Is that what Doc Rivers is going to do? I don't know. But if he does, that will actually help Boban because then he won't have to deal with Towns. Now, let's say if he starts and you get 24, 25 minutes from Boban, then you know what to do, right? Because he's a guy that for his career averages like 1.4 fantasy points per minute. This year, he's averaging 1.5 fantasy points per minute. We know that the human skyscraper can give you a double-double here with relative ease. But on the other side, this is a really good matchup for Towns. You spoke about Butler. I agree with everything you said. I also like Gallinari. You talked about him. So I'll just talk about Butler and then we'll move on. Or Towns, and then we'll move on. If Towns is aggressive and he has no reason not to be aggressive in this game, he should destroy this Clippers team because Doc Rivers doesn't have anyone that he can throw at him that is capable of handling everything Karl Anthony Towns offers. For example, you put Boban on him. Well, maybe he makes post-ups more difficult. Maybe he makes around the basket a little bit more difficult, but Towns has range. The moment Towns starts straying away from the basket and getting shots up, mind you, he's averaging, I think 5 or 6 threes or 5 threes per game this year. That's going to make it impossible for Boban to guard. And plus, he's super athletic. Going to be able to get some easy opportunities moving up and down the court, not just in the half court. Second of all, if you were to put Harris or Montrezl Harrell on him, which might make more sense from an athleticism standpoint, Karl Anthony Towns has a massive height and just size advantage. It's all whether or not he wants to be aggressive, Adam. And, I hate that I have to say that, but the guy's 7'2", 250. If they try putting one of these smaller guys on him, he should decimate him. If they try putting Boban on him, he's way too athletic and way too shifty for his size to have Boban really interfere with anything he's trying to do.
Yeah, and that's why we've really liked aggressive, I use that word loosely with Towns, but offensive-minded centers against the Clippers that have size and range, because it just ends up being a matchup nightmare. Martin Gortat isn't going to. It's not like they can put him back in the rotation to do anything either. He doesn't rebound or defend. Right. So yeah, there's really no answer, and that's why. Talking about the closing lineup, I think there's a chance that you do see that lineup that's like Beverly, Bradley, Lou Williams, Harris, Gallinari, because it's not ideal having Gallinari closing at the 5 in this spot, but it's not ideal playing any of these other guys there either.
All right. Agreed. Jerome says, sounds like you're trying to sell us on Towns. Let me be straight with you, guy. I refuse to sell anybody on Karl Anthony Towns because Karl Anthony Towns isn't sold on Karl Anthony Towns. But if there's a good matchup, you're damn right I'm going to point it out. And as Adam just explained there, it's a really good matchup. I mean, look what other big, athletic, physical, when they want to be, centers can do to this team. Joel Embiid dropped like 100 fantasy points on him. Even Vooch, who isn't even that athletic, dropped 22 and 11 with 48 fantasy points. Jay Kelly says, so with your logic, Laffy, does that mean more Harrell? Well, that's the thing, Adam, and then we can move on. It means more Harrell if Doc Rivers wants to hide Boban on Taj Gibson. Otherwise, probably not.
I don't think they play alongside each other though.
No, you would think Harris would. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it would be Gallinari. Yeah. So I don't think this is a spot where I would expect Harrell to get a bunch of more minutes. Like we've seen Harrell gets more run.
Houston.
Yeah, small teams with small backup centers, and then blowouts. He gets his run. But you have Towns and Gorgie Jang. It's not a spot where I think Harrell's in line for more run unless you get Boban in foul trouble or something. Normally when he gets it, it's because he plays like in the first half. He comes in against a small center and then plays most of the rest of the half. And then in the second half, he comes in against the small center, and then the game stays small and closes small and whatever, and he keeps playing.
All right. By the way, Tim Hardaway is sore. He'll be active and they'll warm him up like a game time decision. That's weird. Kevin Knox is being evaluated, and that's where the Knicks stand right now. All right, let's close it out. And I think Patrick Beverly could play his highest minutes of the season today, but he stinks. So do with that as you please. Golden State and Memphis. Any interest in this one? Warriors are 14-point favorites at the Oracle.
Not a ton. I mean, I have Kevin Durant projected. I have Durant and Curry both projected for around 50. I think that's reasonable. I have some interest in Garrett Temple if you're not completely punting the shooting guard position, because I do think he plays like 36 minutes. He'll be needed defensively as well, but there's nothing that I'm prioritizing here.
Me neither. I think we can move on, close out with the positions. If you have any questions, find us on Twitter. Our handles are right. Actually, his is Ship My Money DFS, not Ship My Modem DSL, although it should be. Mine's Laffy_D. Also, hit us up in Slack chat leading up to lock. More than happy to answer all your questions. And if you are a member of awesomemode.com, get in that Slack chat for sure. Oh, Cameron asked me my thoughts on McKinney. That's a good one. Thank you, Cameron. McKinney has gotten 27 minutes in 2 of his last 3 games, both of them because of blowouts. They blew out Minnesota. They blew out Chicago. He played 27 minutes in each of those. Outside of that, you're not going to get big runs from him. If you think Golden State torches Memphis and his game's over by halftime, McKinney's probably going to play another 25 plus minutes. That said, this is one of those slates where value's opening up. I'm not sure you don't need to go there. If you wanted to sprinkle him into 150 tournament lineups, I don't actually hate it, because we are seeing that he's getting ample blowout run. Maybe I was going to say developmental, definitely not a developmental thing, but he is getting tournament run. So that's where I am on him.
Iguodala is also out, so I have him projected for around 20 minutes anyway. But obviously, just a slow-paced game against Memphis. He has he's much more of a FanDuel play for me than a DraftKings play because more often than not, you're going to end up dropping him.
And the reason McKinney in a blowout matters to me is because in a blowout, you're playing minutes without the big three on the court. So even if you're getting 20 minutes and like 12 of them or however many are alongside one of Durant, Harden, or Clay, you're just so limited anyway. You're likely not going to touch the ball more than a couple of times. And I'd love to say Kyle Anderson was a great play, but Kyle Anderson's never a great play, even though this is a super up-tempo spot. Okay, top positions. Adam, point guard, go.
Russell Westbrook at the top. I like Pat Beverly as a value guy. I like Steph and Ricky Rubio.
All right, yeah. Westbrook, Rubio. I think Beverly, if he gets the minutes, is interesting. But aside from that, I'll mention some other guys at shooting guard, which is what we're going to talk about right now. There's so much multi-position eligibility on DraftKings now that it makes things really tough. But Jimmy Butler, Zach LaVine. I think Oladipo is also in play. I really like Hardaway, but I don't think we can trust it right now. It said he's sore, and that concerns me. Aside from that, it's pretty much those mid-range guys that I like the most here. Adam, what about you? Oh, and Evan Fournier. Sorry, I forgot about Fournier.
Yeah, that's the one I was going to add. Butler, Holiday, LaVine, Depot, Fournier.
Justice Winslow likely to start at power forward. So this is the exact lineup that you and I were anticipating.
Yep.
Now we have to get it in stone. Small forward, Adam.
It's ugly. Gallinari, Durant, Josh Richardson, Jabari Parker.
All right, yeah, Gallinari. I don't want to say Jabari at all. You have to throw Durant in there. I'll throw Tobias in there as well. Power forward, Anthony Davis, Aaron Gordon, and then keep a close eye on Trey Lyles. He could be a great play if Millsap's out. Adam?
Yeah, Davis. I like Noah Vonleh. I mean, if he doesn't get in foul trouble, if Kevin Knox is out, that's really important too. Aaron Gordon, Blake Griffin on FanDuel.
All right. And Winslow, I should mention Winslow.
Yeah.
Where he's eligible. Center, go.
Drummond, Bam, Towns, Boban.
All right. Drummond, Towns. Yeah, I'll throw Bam and Boban in there. And then, so all the same, and then Wendell Carter Jr. on DraftKings specifically. Yeah. Thanks as always for tuning in. Hit us with a like. Adam and I will be back here tomorrow, only if we get enough likes. No, Eddie and Josh are coming up right now. They're going to bring you up until lock. Good luck today, everyone. We'll see you back here tomorrow on the Deeper Dive.